These stories are first-hand accounts shared by Reddit users, detailing unsettling real-life encounters that left lasting impressions. Each narrative provides a chilling glimpse into moments of danger, survival, and eerie coincidences that might make you rethink your surroundings. Disclaimer: these accounts were originally published by Reddit users and are presented as personal experiences. While they're described as true events, their accuracy relies on the original storytellers. The details shared here are intended for awareness and cautionary purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised. Story 1. There's a reason why you should not burn witches. Let me preface by saying I have always been very honest about what I was. I've never had any shame with what I am, with what my mother was, my grandmother, and a long line of women stretching back to the seeming beginning of time. I am a witch. I have always practiced. I've always had power, and not once have I ever harmed another living being. Not ever, despite what anyone might say. Several years ago, I saw a shirt a young lady was wearing on a rare trip to town. It said, "I am the descendant of the witches you forgot to burn." That shirt made me laugh. I ended up buying one off the internet at the public library. I don't have the internet at home, you see. I have been a self-imposed hermit for decades now. It's for the best. I made a choice, and I have to stick with it. Back in the 70s, when I was still relatively young, something dark came to our town. Even I couldn't ascertain where it had come from. Not even my mother or my grandmother or any member of our small coven could understand its origin. Regardless of where it had come from, it had come here. We first became aware of this dark thing when the first child went missing. The little boy turned up later, dead and drained and emaciated like a dried cicada husk. We were blamed first, because of course we were. If there was anything from rain to snow to someone with a bad case of acne, everyone in our town pointed a finger at us. Some did it in jest, some in habit, and some in outright and malicious hatred. Edith had been the first once to sense the thing. I still remember that evening. We had met for tea. No witchy business at all. It had been a delightful afternoon tea, when the poor lady had clutched her pearls and gasped like she'd seen a mouse. "Are you all right, Edith? Tea is too hot," my mother had asked softly. But I knew she suspected that was not the case. Not with the way her eyes narrowed as she looked at the middle-aged woman. "No. Dear heavens. Something has come to our town." I felt it pass through like a cold wind down my spine. Something wicked. Tears were in her eyes as she spoke. My mother nodded and poured out her tea, reading her tea leaves while the rest of us looked on in anticipation. Her face was grim as she read what the bits of waterlogged tea leaves had to say. "My dear ladies, we have work to do," my mother said, standing, wiping her hands on her apron as she stood. "And we got to work, day and night, each of us using our particular talents to not only track the thing, but find a way to contain it." Constance read her ancient tomes and texts. Mary tracked the beast to its lair using her divination skills. My mother and grandmother had their spells and potions, and I helped. My skills were in dreams and their interpretation. I spent many days fast asleep in medicine-induced stupor to glean what I could about this interloper. All I could learn was that it was ancient. Perhaps at one point it was worshipped. It had been summoned by those with less skill to do their bidding. Instead, it had killed its would-be jailers and fled into the world, finding victims and blood where it could. "Do you have a name, Gretchen? Without a name to bind it, our prison will not be as effective." My mother asked me, her voice filled with concern and anger, though thankfully that anger was not directed at me. "No, mother. No name. It has many names, and the dreams have not revealed its true name to me." I said softly, "No matter. The magic and bindings will hold, though we ourselves will be bound to it until our deaths," my grandmother explained. Her voice was old and strained after so many weeks of working magic. She seemed as frail as paper, and as thin. "And what about after our deaths, Elizabeth?" "What then?" Mary asked, her voice sharp and worn thin of patience. "Then it shall be free, unless we can learn its true name and banish it from whence it came," my grandmother said with a tiny shrug. "A price we must pay to contain it. It's been killing children, and it will not stop until it has gone through every innocent life in the town," Edith said teary-eyed. "We lay our trap. It was easy. I was the willing bait for the thing. I was the youngest, and mother and grandmother had filled me with potions and tinctures to make me more appetizing to the thing. We lured it to a small cave located on our property. We needed somewhere private where prying eyes would not see us, and more importantly, not disturb the thing once it was captured. It came quickly, on its shadowed feet. It took no effort to hide itself. It was darkness itself. No prey escaped it once it had its eyes set upon it. By this time, over a dozen children and young women had been killed. More blame was laid at our feet. We were being threatened to our faces. Dead animals were being thrown into our yards. Bricks with threats written on them were tossed through windows. When I felt the things at my back, it took all the strength I had to not run. Our magic was strong, and unbeknownst to the thing, it was already trapped. I could feel the panic set in when I realized it could not leave the cave. Whispered threats were uttered as it reached for me and found it could not grasp me. It writhed, it screamed and begged, and it promised all manner of worldly goods and powers if it would let us go. We ignored it. We all took turns sealing the small cave with bricks and mortar. No easy task to do in the forest on unsteady ground, but we managed. When the final brick was laid, our powers were tied to its containment, to its life, and hopefully, eventually, death. As long as one of us lived, it would be locked behind its prison of earth and brick. But then we started to die. One by one as old age claimed us. My grandmother first, followed by my mother. Constance drowned on a trip to Florida. Edith and Mary lived to be in their 90s. But the Grim Reaper comes for everyone in the end. I am the last. I am in my 80s. I have never married or had children, though it was not for lack of trying. The rumors that it had been me and my coven who had killed those innocents all those years ago never went away. They only grew. And no man wanted me. I have been friendless for many years now. I have tried to find out the true name of the thing, but to no avail. I have looked in books, I have scoured the internet, and found nothing. I have reached out to other supposed witches and been met with scammers and liars. I feel so alone, and now I am dying. In the last few years, the harassment has gotten so much worse. I have not been able to safely leave my home, as when I do, I am followed and stalked. I've been threatened with death, and today it seems like they have made good on their threats. My home is on fire. The flames are creeping along my hallway, and I can see the light from the fire getting brighter. And there is smoke, so much smoke. Outside my window, I hear them screaming. Screaming the same thing people like them have screamed for centuries. Burn the witch. Burn the witch. I have fallen to the floor, and I'm coughing. And I am afraid. Afraid for myself and the others. There are many innocent people that live in this town now. I can feel the thing stirring now. I can feel its anticipation. Once I die, it will be free, and the bricks have already begun to fall away. As the flames finally reach my door, I feel pity. I have no illusions about the pain and fear this creature will unleash on the people of this town. And they are about to learn a very important lesson, one that will be written in the blood of their children. There's a reason why you shouldn't burn witches. Story 2. Sometimes the road signs lie. A few weeks ago, my wife and I went on a road trip for a family reunion in El Paso, Texas. I am now sitting in the hospital waiting room, desperately wishing we hadn't. How much longer? Melanie asked, leaning her seat back and putting her hand into the small of her back in a feeble attempt to find a more comfortable position. Google says we've got a few more hours to go, I said, glancing quickly at my phone sitting in the cup holder, then putting my eyes back to the road. Do we need to stop again? Melanie shifted in her seat a bit, removed her hand from behind her, then sat it back up to its original vertical position. At 7 months pregnant, her options for comfort were quickly dwindling, and none of them involved the front seat of a car. No, let's just go. If we stop again, I'm not going to want to get back into the car. Signal lost, my phone's robotic female voice announced. God damn it, I sighed. The phone had been doing that for the past couple of hours, at increasing intervals. There had apparently been an accident or something on the main highway, which would have backed us up by at least an hour according to the all-knowing Google. In order to avoid that, we'd taken a detour that snaked around the accident through the desert on a two-lane highway. That had been 3 hours ago, maybe more, It was hard to keep track of when it had happened, because even before the phone had alerted us of the accident, the whole trip had been little more than a palette of browns and grays broken up only by the regular bathroom break. As I saw it, the New Mexico desert was the skid mark on the underpants of America, and if I never had the pleasure of driving through it again, it would be too soon. The sun had set about an hour ago, not long before the signal started getting more spotty, and the highway hypnosis had really started to get to me. There was nothing but desert on either side of us, and even with the high beams on the darkness covered us like a thick blanket. "Got any more Red Bull?" I asked. "If we're going to go for a few more hours, I need some wings." Melanie reached into the back seat for a second, grunting with discomfort, then returned with a can of Red Bull. "Last one," she said. "This was sitting on the seat, so the sun warmed it up for you." "Great," I said, taking the can, cracking the seal, and swallowing 3 large gulps. "This will sit well with all the other junk I've been eating for the past 2 days." Without a baby on the way, Mel and I could have driven the stretch between Bozeman and El Paso in 2 days without a problem. But with her being as pregnant as she was, we had to carve out almost double the time, and she was still miserable. I let out a burp that tasted like all the atrocious snacks and truck stop food from that day, mixed with the warm energy drink I was layering on top, and solemnly promised myself I would eat nothing but salad and water for the rest of my life. "Turn left here for the Church of Christ." "I thought the Church of Christ was back there," Mel said, reading the dilapidated sign as we passed it. "No, that was the Church of Jesus Christ," I said. Big difference, apparently. All through the drive, we'd seen a wide variety of local churches, mostly generic, but after passing one called the Church of Liberty, over a backdrop of a poorly drawn Confederate flag, we had turned it into a sort of game to see who could find the most outlandish one. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the hum of the engine and the intermittent signal lost notification from my phone. I had looked at the phone earlier when the signal was stronger and saw that we just needed to go to the end of this road, turn right, and we'd find ourselves getting back onto the freeway. So although the intermittent announcement from the cup holder was annoying, I wasn't particularly concerned. That was until we saw a sign that said freeway entrance, left 1 mile. "I thought you said it was right at the end of the road," Melanie said, sitting up and grabbing the phone. "That's what it said," I insisted. "I checked it last time we had service like half an hour ago. We had about 60 or so miles to go, and then it was right." "How sure are you?" she asked, putting the phone back into the cup holder. "'Cause your phone is still saying it has no service, so it's not going to be any help." "Pretty damn," I said. Just then we passed another sign, freeway entrance, left, 0.5 mile. "At least I think so. I think we should follow the signs," Mel said. "I don't want to get lost out here, and the phone hasn't had consistent service in a while. It could have reset and changed routes or something to have us avoid the highway. Remember last time?" I did remember last time, a Vegas trip that ended up being 4 hours longer than it should have been because my phone reset and had us taking frontage roads and city streets. It would have been longer had Mel not thought to check the route on her phone. I was sure that I'd seen it was taking us back to the highway, and that the next turn was a right in about 30 minutes or so, given our current speed, but with the evidence to the contrary quickly approaching me in the darkness, illuminated by my headlights, I made the single most critical mistake that I would regret for the rest of my life. I followed the street sign and turned left. Mel leaned back in her seat, embarking again on her quest for a comfortable position, and I continued to stare at the lines in the road as we passed. Time begins to lose meaning when you've been on the road in the dark for as long as we were that night. It could have been hours that we spent speeding straight down the desert road, or it could have been days. With no focal point, it was really up to the clock alone to tell us how long we'd been there, and the clock on the dashboard had inexplicably reset at some point, something it did on occasion for most of the time I'd owned the car, another bullet for Melanie to fire at me whenever we got into our marital spats. I didn't care, and she really didn't either, but it was another straw to load up on the camel's back nonetheless. My faith in the phone had begun to waver even further, as I was becoming sure even that clock was running slow somehow. We'd go for 5 or 6 miles according to the odometer, and the clock would read only a minute or 2 had passed. I drained the last bit of Red Bull down my throat, again promising myself nothing but clean eating after this trip was over. Moments later, I felt a dull pressure in my bowels, The last drop of liquid must have been the last straw for my bladder. Mel slept quietly next to me, having finally crashed a while back, and I made the second decision I would come to regret. Although we hadn't seen another car for miles, I flipped my hazard lights on and pulled over to the side of the road. I turned off the car and stepped out of the car and relieved myself, relishing one of the finer points of being a man and having the ability to take a leak in the middle of the road without much fanfare and return to the car. Mel stirred then and asked if we were there yet. Not yet. Just a bit further. Had to take a leak. She rolled her eyes and closed them again. I turned the key to start the car back up and heard a sound that sunk my heart into my stomach. Click, 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 click. Ah, shit, I said under my breath. Please don't do this. I turned the key again and once more heard the series of clicks telling me that my car didn't have enough power to start back up. Fuck, I sighed, resting my head against the steering wheel in defeat. What's wrong? Mel asked, opening one eye. The battery's dead. What? There was a hint of panic in her voice, and she sat back up, totally awake now. But the car was just running. Yeah, it was running off of the alternator. The battery needs just enough power to start. Then the car can run off of the power generated by the alternator. All we need is a jump, and we should be able to get the rest of the way, as long as we don't turn the car off. But who's going to jump us? Mel asked. When was the last time you saw a car? It's been a while, I admitted. Definitely not since we made that turn back there. Fuck, Mel spat. Fuck, fuck, fuck. Stay here, I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. Where are you going? She asked, the panic in her voice rising. Just up there, I said, pointing down the road. I think I see a sign, maybe 100 yards out there. It might give us an idea of which direction we need to go, or if we need to just wait until the sun comes up. I could tell she didn't like it, but she didn't say anything. I'll keep my flashlight on so you can see where I am. I'll just go there, then straight back. She nodded. Unless I see a Denny's, then you're on your own. She flipped me off. I kissed her cheek and stepped out into the night. The air was brisk, despite having been downright hot during the day, and I remembered learning in science class as a kid that desert wildlife had to be tough enough to endure not only the heat during the day, but the cold, sometimes freezing temperatures at night as well. I shivered and hugged my arms around my torso and made my way down the road to where I thought I'd seen a road sign. As I approached, I realized it wasn't the kind of sign I was hoping for. It was made of cracked wood that looked just a little better than the sign for the church we'd seen a while back, and on it painted in white letters it read, Gomper's Farm, above a crudely drawn arrow pointing down a dirt path to the right. My gaze followed the arrow, and I thought I could see a light far off in the distance. A scream broke through the darkness that turned my blood to ice. Mel, I called, wheeling around and bolting back the way I came. Melanie. I could see the shape of the car in the distance, but it was too far away from my flashlight to do much good. I sprinted down the road, screaming my wife's name in a hot panic. What? What? Melanie called back, alarmed. I slowed when I heard her voice and held the light up again. She was standing on the passenger side of the car with the door open. I thought I heard you screaming, I said through heaving breaths. She looked around, confused. No, you didn't hear that? I asked. She shook her head. No, I don't think so. I was in the car until I heard you yelling, though. Where did it come from? I don't know, I said, shaking my head and spitting the bitter flavor of adrenaline into the dirt. Maybe it was an animal or something, she suggested. What did the sign say? There's a farmhouse or something about a mile down the road, I think, I explained. It's not exactly ideal, but if I jog it, I can make it in about 10 minutes or so. If anyone's there, all they'd have to do is give me a ride back and help us jump the car. If nobody's there, we'll probably have to wait till morning unless a car happens to pass by. She mulled it over for a moment. Then I saw the resolve on her face, and I knew what was coming next. I'm going with you then. I didn't like it, but I could tell that arguing wasn't going to get me anywhere but the doghouse, and considering the scream I heard, or thought I heard anyway, I preferred having her close. Fine, I agreed. Grab her jacket, though. I'm going to grab mine and a couple of water bottles from the back. A moment later, we were hiking down the road, our silhouettes illuminated intermittently by the orange hazard lights we'd elected to leave on. I doubted the battery would last if those lights were on too long, but if someone was driving past, I would hate for them to miss it. Mel had thought to leave a note on the windshield telling whomever found it that we'd gone to the farmhouse and would be back shortly. If anyone was kind enough to stop, they'd hopefully see the letter and stick around long enough to help. Or they'd know where to look for us coming back, so they could take whatever they wanted out of the car before we returned. There was a cool breeze that played with our hair as we walked. Not uncomfortable, but enough to make me zip my jacket up just a bit more. Mel held the only flashlight we had, and the beam bounced up and down in the darkness like a buoy. The car was barely visible when Mel shrieked, so suddenly I nearly tripped on my own foot. What? What? I asked, suddenly panicked. Look, she said, extending her finger past the head of the flashlight. What? It's gone now. You didn't see it? No, I was too busy asking myself why I'm hiking with a pregnant banshee. There's something out there, she said, ignoring my jab. Just past that rock. I saw a pair of golden eyes. Probably a coyote, I said, starting to walk again. They're cowards. If we keep walking and talking, nothing should bug us, especially if we stick to the road here. Mel nodded, then caught up to me. How much longer do you think it'll be till we get to the farm? Dunno, I shrugged. 10 or 15 minutes, maybe. Just then I saw the eye she was talking about. Out in the distance, next to a large boulder on the side of the road, sat a pair of curious golden eyes. Definitely a coyote, I said, pointing at it. You can see its shape a bit. All fours, low to the ground. It looks like it might be a little bit bigger than the ones I've seen, but there's not much else out here that looks like that. That's probably what I heard earlier, too. One of these guys catching a rabbit or something. I wasn't sure I believed it, but it felt good to get some sort of explanation on the record. We kept talking as we walked down the path, closer to the eyes, and when they disappeared I was a bit disappointed but not surprised. Part of me wanted to see the coyote up close, but if we got close enough to see it, that probably meant we were close to a den, which is the last place we'd want to find ourselves. We talked about what we'd do when we finally got home and how soon we'd find ourselves laughing about the whole ordeal when Mel stopped suddenly in the middle of the road. Shit, what is it now? I asked, looking around another pair of eyes. I have to pee. No chance you can hold it. I asked, holding back a chuckle at the poor timing. Not unless you can talk this kid out of using my bladder as a waterbed, she replied, handing me the flashlight. Where should I go? Why not right here? Are you kidding? Not even a little bit, I said. You probably shouldn't wander too far off the trail, and it's not like anyone's around to see you anyway. Hell, if someone showed up and the universe decided now was the time to embarrass you, I'd still take that over the rest of the walk. Fine, she sighed, pulling her maternity pants down and squatting. As she did her business, I took the opportunity to scan the surroundings with the flashlight. I found a few more pairs of golden eyes on either side of the road, which quickened my pulse just a little. I didn't like being outnumbered, and I liked being surrounded even less. Melanie finished her business, and with some assistance from me, to get back up to a vertical position. We were off again, our feet crunching against the dirt as we walked. I thought I heard something then, and this time it was my turn to stop. What? Mel asked. Sure, I said. I started again, then stopped. What is it? Mel whispered. Another scream? Nothing, I lied, picking the pace back up. I thought I heard a car. We walked again in silence, Mel forgetting to keep the conversation going to keep the coyotes back, and me listening too intently to think about topics to discuss. I knew I'd heard something behind us. I hadn't noticed it at first, or maybe it hadn't been there at first, but after we stopped I could make out the faint sound of footsteps on dirt that stopped almost as soon as we did, and picked up, or so I thought, as soon as we had. I'd also heard a strange lapping sound just after we started walking again, like something licking the urine off the dirt road. When the farmhouse came into view, the relief between us was palpable. We had both been so preoccupied with the growing number of eyes on either side of the road that we hadn't noticed that the light I'd seen from the road had shut off. It was a small house, but I hadn't expected much more than what it was given the location. If it had 4 walls and a roof, I would have been happy, but from the outside I would have guessed that it had at least a few bedrooms, and behind it stood a structure that looked like it may be a detached garage or a large shed of some sort. We approached the house, and I was just about to walk up the wooden porch steps when Melanie grabbed my hand. Hold on. I turned to look at her. Her eyes were wide, and the pupils were so dilated from the darkness they were nearly black. What's wrong? Do you think this is a good idea? I roll my eyes. If it wasn't, you could have said something 20 minutes ago. I know. I mean, she paused for a second. Do you think these people will help us? We're strangers in the middle of nowhere, and it's the middle of the night. I shrugged. I think the worst that can happen is they tell us to leave. They'll probably answer the door with a shotgun in hand. But who wouldn't? Melanie nodded, and I saw her throat work up and down in a dry, nervous swallow. I walked up the few steps, the wood creaking beneath my feet, leaving Melanie at the bottom. I held up my fist and rapped 3 times on the storm door. We waited, listening intently for sounds inside the house, but heard nothing. Instead, I heard what sounded like the soft, padded feet of a coyote in the dirt behind us, but I brushed that away. They were known for being incredibly quiet. That thought didn't make me feel much better. I opened the storm door and knocked again, this time on the wooden door. The sound carried far better, but again we heard nothing but silence. I think we should go, Melanie said. Something isn't right. The knot in my stomach agreed, and I turned to leave just as the door opened. Who's there? A man's voice said. He hadn't turned the light on in the house, so when I turned back around all I could see was a silhouette in the dark, illuminated only by the ambient glow of Melanie's flashlight that was pointed directly at my back. I'm sorry to bother you, sir, I said. My name is Matthew Howell, and this is my wife, Melanie. Our car died down the road, and we were hoping you could give us a jump. No, the man said under his breath. No. Sorry, I said, thinking I misheard him. Sorry, no. We cannot jump your car tonight. It'll have to wait until morning. Sir, I'm sorry to impose, but we really can't dash. A twig snapped behind me, very quiet, but clear nonetheless. Please, come inside, the man said. You'll stay here tonight. I turned to look at Melanie, who was already walking up the steps. The man opened the door wider to let us in and clicked on a light in the hallway, bathing us in a glow that immediately made me feel better. The farmhouse looked on the inside, just as I would have guessed. It was modestly furnished with what looked like handcrafted furniture. Paintings of flowers and landscapes adorned striped wallpaper-covered walls that looked like they were most recently renovated in the 70s, and faded area rugs covered with floors that creaked beneath our feet, even with the slightest weight. The man who stood before me now looked just like the kind of person who would live in a house like this. He had thin white hair and a large beard with yellow tobacco stains around his mouth, and he wore a set of beige long johns under a pair of pants held up with suspenders, the outfit of a man who had been disturbed in his bed. I guessed he was somewhere in his 60s, still reasonably muscular from working on the farm, but well past his prime and settling into the atrophy of old age. He had been holding a shotgun in one hand and just then put it down and leaned it up against the door frame. The man turned and called to someone inside the house. Ma, put a kettle on, would ya? We've got 2 here for the night. Really? I said. I don't think we can dash. I insist, the man said, turning back to me. The roads aren't safe at night. It's too easy to get turned around. Yeah, I can see that, I admitted. I thought we were doing well until we saw that sign for the highway back there. The man looked at me, and for a brief moment I thought I saw something in his eyes, but before I could make out what it was gone. The sign was all he said, and gave an understanding nod. Do you have a restroom I could use? Melanie asked, cutting in. Yes, down the hall and dash. The man stopped when he saw her, and again there was something in his expression I didn't like, but again I couldn't make it out before it was gone. To the right, he finished. Melanie thanked him and made her way to the bathroom. We'll be just around the corner in the kitchen, the man told her. He turned and led me around the corner where I now heard someone else bustling about, presumably putting a kettle on. My name is Arthur, the man said, sitting down at the kitchen table. This here is Ruthie, he said, gesturing to a small woman in a white nightgown who was just then lighting the gas stove. Ruthie turned around and offered me a smile. Hello, she said. Did I hear your name is Matthew? I nodded. Yes, and my wife's name is Melanie. They're in the family way, Arthur told Ruthie. Oh dear, Ruthie said pleasantly. How exciting. How far along is she? Not the word I'd use, Arthur said under his breath. 7 months? I told her. 7 months, she exclaimed, beaming. And where is she now? She's in the restroom, I said. Oh, I've got some things for her. Let me run and get them, Ruthie said pleasantly, then disappeared around the corner. Arthur and I sat in silence for a moment. Then I said, "Are you sure you can't just give us a jump? Or do you have a phone I could use?" He shook his head. "Sorry, but no. Ruthie and I don't go out after dark, and we haven't had use for a phone in 20 years or more. We'll be happy to give you a ride back to your car and get you on your way as soon as the sun's up." "What if we dash?" "Listen," Arthur said seriously, leaning forward. He again wore the expression I'd seen earlier. It was one I didn't understand, but looking back at it now, I think my father, who had served in Desert Storm and had seen the expression worn by men as they stood on the other side of a loaded gun, but were determined to show courage in the face of fear, would have picked it up in an instant. "You were with your lady the whole time, right?" "Ever since the car broke down, yeah," I said. "And even before that, we've been elbow to elbow for just about every second for the past 2 days." "All right, good." He leaned back in his chair. "That's good. What's this about?" I asked, and perhaps he would have told me then, although looking back I doubted that he could have. Not then. But the tea kettle began to whistle, and Ruthie returned quickly to shut it off and poured the contents into 4 mugs. Melanie came around the other corner and took a seat next to me. Ruthie asked us if we took cream or sugar in our tea, which neither of us did. Then she brought mugs over with chamomile tea bags, steeping in each of them, and took a seat next to Arthur. "We have a guest bedroom at the end of the hall you can use until the morning," Ruthie said. "I'm glad you found your way here safely." "Yeah," Melanie said, bobbing her tea bag up and down in the water by the string it was attached to. "Those coyotes were really giving me the creeps." "Coyotes?" Ruthie asked. "Yeah, Ma, coyotes," Arthur said in a tone that sounded like they'd had the conversation 1,000 times. "I gotta chase 'em away from the chickens at least a few times a week, you know that." She nodded. "Yes, I just meant I hadn't seen any tonight. Probably because they were all with us," I said. There were about a dozen sets of eyes following us up the road. "A dozen, you say?" Ruthie asked, surprised. "Yeah, that'd make sense," Arthur said. "They didn't try to get at you, though, did they?" "No," Melanie said, taking a small exploratory sip of her tea, then another larger one, satisfied that it wasn't too hot. "They stayed off the road." "I think one of them was behind us, though, so I don't think they all stayed off the road," I said. Melanie looked at me reproachfully. "And when did you plan on telling me?" "As soon as we didn't have one behind us anymore," I told her, shrugging. "They didn't get too close, though?" Arthur asked. "No, they kept their distance," I told him. "I'm pretty sure the closest one was the one behind us, and that was still a ways back, I think." He nodded and sipped his own mug. "That's good. Those coyotes are serious business." "Do you get many of them out here?" Melanie asked. Arthur ran a hand through his thin, silver hair. "You could say that, I suppose. More than most, but less than some. I think they like the chickens we keep in the back. Not much else to eat around here that isn't burrowed away somewhere. So it's an easy meal if they can get at them before I hear the commotion and fire off a round of 2. Melanie shivered. "I'm glad I don't have to worry about that sort of thing." "Where are you folks from?" Arthur asked, sipping at his own mug now. "Montana," I said. "We have coyotes up our way, too, but they mostly stay in the more rural parts, and we don't have chickens or anything to worry about. I found one rooting around in the garbage, though, when I was a kid. I told everyone I thought I saw a wolf." "The boy who cried wolf," Melanie teased, jabbing my side with her elbow. "That's Matt, all right." I rolled my eyes and fiddled with my own tea bag. I wasn't one for tea, especially chamomile, because it reminded me of being sick as a kid. My mother swore by her herbal remedies, especially those that came in the form of tea. "Are we really staying the night?" Melanie asked, turning to me. I looked at Arthur, who gave me a clear, solemn nod. I said, "Yeah, I guess we are. It's late, and Arthur and Ruthie say they have a guest room we can stay in for the night." "Are you sure?" Melanie asked, turning to Ruthie. "It won't be too much trouble?" Ruthie waved the idea off like a fly. "None at all. We haven't had visitors in 10 years or better. Not since the Pruitts came for Christmas. And aside from my boys, you're the first to come to our door in just about as long." "Oh, you have children?" Melanie asked. "Long grown now," Arthur said, nodding and staring into his mug. "Twins," Ruthie said, beaming. "They're about your age, I guess. I've got most of their old clothes and things in the back room, if you'd like to take a look before you go to bed." I pulled the chest out of the closet already. Melanie looked at me, and I gave her a shrug. Then she returned Ruthie's smile and together they made their way further into the house. "You two are lucky," Arthur said when the women had left. "How do you figure?" I asked. "When the coyotes are hungry, they'll try to get at just about anything that moves. If you really had as many watching you as you say, you could have been walking to your own graves." I wasn't sure I believed him, but the shiver that crawled down my spine certainly did. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the distant voices of our wives talking about children and the tick of an old grandfather clock somewhere in the house when I heard the scream again. It was coming from outside, somewhere close to the house, but it was hard to tell. I sat up in my chair, but Arthur didn't move. "Birds," he said flatly. "Sorry." I asked. "We've got birds out here that sound like that sometimes," he said. "Sounds like a lady shrieking, or sometimes a child crying. But it's just the birds calling to each other." "Birds?" He nodded. "What kind of bird sounds like that?" He shrugged. "I don't know. I heard them called lyrebirds once. Not sure if that was the name, or just a fitting description of the things." "Yeah," I said, feeling the name scratch away something on the surface of my brain, a fact buried under the dust and cobwebs in my mind. "I've heard of those, I think. They can copy other noises like parrots can, right? I thought they lived in Australia or something." Arthur shrugged again. "Couldn't say. I don't even know if that's what they are for certain, but I know that the sound we just heard was one of them birds." I settled back in my seat, feeling better about the scream I'd heard earlier. It would have made sense if it came from the air. That could explain why I wasn't sure where it had come from. That reminds me of something that happened to me as a kid. Nothing like crying wolf, but it was an important lesson, I think. Arthur said, his words careful somehow. I took a sip of the tea between my palms, not because I wanted it, but because it felt impolite to leave the whole mug full. "Have you ever heard of Arthur searched for the word, a brood parasite? I think that's what they call it." I shook my head. "It's a kind of bird that leaves its eggs in another bird's nest. Sometimes it'll push the other eggs out, but usually it just leaves their egg there for the other bird to care for. I heard about these when I was a little boy, maybe 8 or so, and I found a robin's nest with a bunch of little blue eggs and one single black and white speckled one. I thought I'd found something really special, so every day that spring I would climb that tree to see if it hatched. A couple weeks went by, and eventually the egg hatched. It was the first one, and I was so excited to see the little black chick inside. Not long after the others hatched, and each of them was a little robin that looked nothing like this black bird, which was now twice the size of these other ones. The days went by, and one day, as I was about to climb the tree, I found one of the baby robins laying in the grass. I picked it up and climbed back up the tree to find that of the 4 robins that had started in the tree, there was only one left, and, of course, my big black bird that was now far larger than the others. It had started to knock the other birds out of the nest. I put the chick that I'd saved in the grass back into the nest, and do you know what that black bird did? I shook my head. It killed it right before my eyes, tore it apart like it was nothing. I ran to tell my father, and that's when I learned about birds that impose their eggs in others' nests so that the other birds will raise them. I thought that dash. A voice outside interrupted us. It was a cry that almost sounded like it had words this time, but the words were indistinguishable despite the fact that it sounded like it was coming from right outside the window. Arthur sat bolt upright and turned his head quickly to the window. He stood from his seat and crossed the room with 3 large steps. "I was just telling a story. Leave us be." I couldn't be certain, but I thought I heard something scurry away in the dirt. "What was that?" I asked, trying not to sound as nervous as I now felt. "These damn coyotes," Arthur said. "I thought you said the cries were the birds," I said. "Them too," Arthur said, his tone coming off more annoyed than anything, although there was something else as well. "The coyotes get curious, and the birds get agitated, and before I know it, this house is the busiest place in all of New Mexico." He walked around the house, and I heard the doorknob shake. Was he checking the lock? Then he returned. "I think it's best if we call it a night. Ruthie'll be up early to make you breakfast, but feel free to sleep in as late as you'd like. In the morning, we'll take the truck down to the road, and I'll jump it for you, and you'll be on your way." I took another gulp of tea, trying to get the mug down at least halfway, and agreed. Melanie was totally out by the time I entered the room. She couldn't have been there for long, but I saw that Ruthie had set her up nicely with a nest of pillows in all the right places, and it looked like this might be the first night in weeks that she got a decent night's sleep. I undressed down in my boxers and slid into bed next to my wife. I was exhausted, but sleep was nowhere to be found, and so I lay there staring up at the ceiling, wondering about the decisions that had led us there. There had been a knot growing in the pit of my stomach ever since we'd parked the car, and it had only tightened since we'd arrived at the farmhouse. Arthur and Ruthie were nice enough, but there was something they weren't telling us. If I were watching the night play out like a movie, I imagined that the twist would be that they were secretly plotting our demise, or that the screaming sounds I'd been hearing were those of their victims chained up in the large garage behind the house. But I didn't think so. It wasn't that I didn't think they were capable. I'd only just met them and had no idea what they were actually capable of. It was more that it just didn't seem to fit. It was the look on Arthur's face when he asked me if I'd been with Melanie the whole time we'd been stopped there. It was the undertone in his voice when he told whatever was outside that he was just telling me a story. It was the story itself. What was that exactly? Just an elderly man retelling a memory from his childhood? Or was it something else? A cry echoed outside the window, this one sounding like MAA. It seemed more believable now that it was a bird, because it certainly didn't sound human now that I'd had the chance to hear it without other sound pollution. Not exactly human, anyway. Melanie snorted beside me. The preamble to a full-on snore coming in the next few weeks, I was sure. Another scream, this one closer, but from a different direction. The birds were all talking to each other. I sighed and closed my eyes, trying to will myself to sleep, even if it was for just a couple of hours. The house was cold, probably from poor insulation and the single-paned windows. I pulled the sheets up and turned to my side, pulling my knees up to my chest for a little extra warmth. I was nearly asleep when I heard claws scratch the wall outside the house, and my eyes flew open. Was that the coyotes again? Did coyotes do that? I wasn't sure. I sat up and listened for more, knowing full well that in the morning I would feel silly for being as scared as I was, but also knowing that the night has a way of making monsters come out, even if they're just the ones in your head. A scream broke through the silence, this one incredibly loud and right outside the window. I looked over at Melanie, expecting her to be as awake as I was, but she only stirred. I got out of bed and crossed the room, throwing the curtains open, hoping to scare away whatever was sitting outside. I hadn't expected to see a face on the other side of the glass. I stumbled backward, tripping on my own feet and falling onto the wooden floor with a sharp thud. From where I lay, I could see nothing but moonlight coming through the crack in the curtain, and for that I was thankful. Had the face been that of Arthur, I would have at least understood, despite how sick it would have made me feel. But the face I saw through the glass wasn't Arthur or Ruthie. I don't think it was even human. Just like the sounds of screaming I had heard through the wall, it was close to being human, but still not quite right. The eyes were too big and far apart, the mouth too wide, the nose too flat. Could it have been my reflection? The logical part of my mind liked that answer. It liked it a lot. I stood up cautiously, fearful that the face would still be there peering at me through the glass. But as I stood, I saw that that wasn't the case. I could see myself in the glass, just well enough to convince myself that that's what I had seen. Scared of my own reflection. Had Melanie been awake, there's no way I would ever live this one down. But despite the noises I had just made, she still lay soundly asleep. I closed the curtains again, taking care to ensure that not a sliver of moonlight came through them, then lay back down next to my wife. I didn't sleep much that night. I don't think I would have regardless, given the intermittent screams and cries coming from just outside my bedroom window, but every time I closed my eyes, I could see the image of the face that was looking back at me through the glass. A circus funhouse image of a human face burned into my retinas like the flash of a camera lens. I must have fallen asleep at some point, because I opened my eyes to find rods of sunlight cast from the window into the bedroom. Melanie was stirring, which meant soon she would be awake and in the bathroom. I checked my phone, still no service, but it reported the time to be just before 6. I got out of bed and got dressed, determined to get out of there as soon as Melanie was ready. The image from the night before had dulled by then, and although the memory still gave me the creeps, the logical part of my brain had daylight on its side, and by the end of breakfast, I would have myself convinced that it had been my reflection in the glass. I quietly opened the door and stepped out of the bedroom. The scent of coffee wafted through the air, although I didn't hear anyone moving around the house just yet. I made my way to the kitchen, expecting to find either Arthur or Ruthie sitting down at the table enjoying a mug, or at least a full pot of coffee with a timer that had gone off. Instead, I found 2 empty mugs of coffee and a half pot sitting on the burner. I didn't have time to wonder where they had gotten off to, because I heard Ruthie's voice in the yard calling to Arthur. I peeked out of the window to see Arthur's truck backing up toward the large garage. Was it just the one? She called to him over the sound of the truck's engine. Arthur turned off the truck, stepped out of the driver's seat, and came around to the bed where he had 2 large iron poles sticking out over the back. No, it was 2 this time, he said. Got a 1-mile one and a half-mile one now. He dropped the tailgate of the truck, and the 2 metal poles clattered loudly. They're getting more clever, Ruth, Arthur said, hoisting the large street signs out of the back of the truck and carrying them to the shed. It was only the one sign with the Pruitts, and I don't even know where they're getting these things. Probably off some stretch of the road around here. We're going to have to do something about it sooner or dash. Don't you say such a thing, Ruthie said sharply. I know, Arthur said, putting his hands up. I'm sorry. I just don't like cleaning up their messes is all. Well, take it up with them, Ruthie said. He's your dash. Arthur looked up fiercely at her, and she didn't finish her sentence. He may be yours, but he ain't mine, he growled. Mine's out under the apple tree. The couple walked around toward the door, and I quickly slipped back to the bedroom. Melanie was sitting up. Hey, Matt, what time is it? I don't know, I said. Somewhere around 6, I think. We should get going, though. Melanie stretched. Yeah, she said through a wide yawn. That's probably a good idea. How'd you sleep? I slept great. I lied, knowing that the truth would surely cause questions that I'd rather not answer just then. Me too, she said, scratching the back of her head. Best night's sleep I've had since I got pregnant. Let me pee. Then I'll get dressed and we can go. I agreed, trying not to sound too eager with a rising sense of unease filling my gut. She got out of bed, donned a robe that I assumed Ruthie had given her the night before, and patted her way to the guest bathroom across the hall. Arthur had gotten up earlier this morning to collect the street signs we had seen the night before. That much was obvious. What wasn't so obvious was why. Who had put them there? The elderly couple returned from outside, just as Mel was coming back from the bathroom. Oh, Ruthie exclaimed. I didn't think you two would be up for at least another hour or so. Let me get breakfast on. That's all right, I said. We really should get back on the road anyway. I have coffee on already, so at least take a cup to go with a couple of blueberry muffins I made the night before last. I opened my mouth to politely decline, but Mel beat me to it. I don't think I can look at a blueberry right now, she said, followed by a dry heave. The woman nodded knowingly. Just fine then. How about you? I shook my head. I'm not much of a breakfast person, I told her. All right, Ruthie said, drawing the word out like she was talking to children. But if you leave this house hungry, it's your own fault. She went into the kitchen, presumably to get her own breakfast started, and Melanie went back to the bedroom to collect her things, but Arthur lingered with me in the hallway. Your wife gets morning sickness a lot? He asked after a silence that felt like an eternity, broken only by the sound of Ruthie's movements in the kitchen. She did first, I told him. This is the first time in a while, though. The road trip is probably taking a toll, I think. Arthur nodded slowly. Yeah, probably. Then, after another long pause. You said you were with her the whole time, right? Ever since your car broke down. Yeah, I said slowly. Why? He shook his head, as if that told me all that I needed to know. All right, Matt, Mel said, opening the door behind me. I'm ready when you are. I'll get my keys, Arthur said. The ride back to the car was quiet and uneventful. Mel waited in the passenger seat, resuming her quest for a comfortable position, while I popped the hood and went to work connecting the 2 batteries to each other to start the car. To my relief, the car started on the second try. Thank you for everything, I told Arthur as I slammed the hood of the car down. Last night would have been much worse if it wasn't for you and your wife. I offered my hand out for him to shake, which he took with the leathery grip of a man who had spent his whole life working with his hands. There was another look in his eye then, as we stood on the shoulder of the road, shaking hands, that told me there was more that he wanted to say, but something even then was holding him back. We loosened our grip, and just before I could turn away, Arthur stopped me. Hold on a minute, he said. I've got something for you from Ruthie. He went to the cab of his truck and returned with a dilapidated cardboard box. Some clothes for your little one. It ain't much, but we won't get any use out of them. I took the box and thanked him, doubting that we'd ever use them, but feeling that if I refused, he would insist, and I would still leave with the box. "Thanks, Arthur," I said. "One more thing," he said before I could turn around. His voice got quiet when he spoke, just above a whisper and far too quiet for anyone other than the two of us to hear. I looked up at him and frowned, searching his face for the joke that wasn't there, nodded uneasily, then said goodbye. Arthur stood in the middle of the dirt road, waving broadly at us from the rearview mirror as his silhouette disappeared into the dust kicked up by our tires. I never thought I'd return to Gomper's farm, let alone so quickly, but circumstances change, and with them, expectations. It took me nearly a whole day to find the road the signs had led us down, and by then it was dusk, and I returned back to my hotel so as not to be out after dark. Melanie stayed home this time. Her condition had gotten significantly worse since our road trip, and she had been prescribed bed rest by the OBGYN, among other things, until she was ready to deliver. Her mother hadn't been happy with me flying out to New Mexico, even with the lie we told her about it being a work trip, but her mother's chagrin was a small price to pay for what I was hoping to get out of a reunion with Arthur and Ruthie. I drove up the dirt road following the only street sign now for Gomper's farm, hoping to find an answer to something that had happened to us not long after returning home. I parked my car next to Arthur's pickup truck and stepped out. I waited for a moment, wondering if I would hear the sound of the birds carrying human-like screams along the air. To my relief, I heard nothing at all. I walked around to the front of the house, prepared to knock as I had mere weeks before, but found that I didn't need to. The door to the farmhouse was open. Dirt coated the entrance floor, suggesting that it had been open for a while. Cautiously, remembering the face I had seen in the window, but feeling the bravery given to me by the daylight, I called out into the house. "Hello," I called. "Arthur? Ruthie?" No reply. I stepped into the house, noting first that the shotgun Arthur had answered the door with was no longer propped against the wall in the corner by the door. "Hello," I called again. "Is anyone there?" I explored the house carefully, worried that if I surprised anyone too much that I would find my skull full of buckshot, but sensing that I was totally alone. The kitchen was clean, with only a couple of plates in the sink with dried-on food that could have been from the night before, or perhaps longer. The bedroom where Mel and I had stayed looked exactly like we had left it. I called out again as I headed up the stairs toward the part of the house I hadn't been. There were 3 doors down the hallway from the top of the stairs. I chose the first and opened it. It was a young boy's room, a time capsule from decades ago. The boy who had once dwelt here must have been 6 or so, judging by the toys, books, and decorations that filled the space. Above the bed in large block letters was the name Jonathan. The next room was a bathroom adorned with yellow daisies over most of the surfaces. I opened the door to the final room and was struck by 2 things simultaneously. First was the body of Ruthie Gomper laying in the bed. She wore a nightgown and looked as if she had gone peacefully in her sleep. Second was the putrid odor that had somehow not completely filled the house, possibly because the door had been left open. It was clear that she had been dead for at least a few days, perhaps not long after Mel and I had left. But there was still no sign of Arthur. I went downstairs and out the front door, glad to be rid of the smell that followed me after I opened the door. I walked around the side of the house, calling Arthur's name and getting nothing in return. I checked inside the large shed and found the road signs that Mel and I had seen driving down the road that night, along with a third that said freeway entrance, left, 1 mile, just like the first sign we had seen. I turned the flashlight of my phone on and held it up to get a better look at the shed. There was some old farm equipment scattered around the area, but what caught my attention was toward the back. I took a few more steps to get a better look and found a corner of the space that had been decorated like a bedroom. There was an old bed with a rusty frame and a torn mattress set up in the corner, along with a collection of what appeared to be chew toys sprinkled around. Above the bed in block letters, similar to the boy's bedroom I had seen in the house, was the name Christopher. I took a few more curious steps forward to get a better look at the makeshift living space, then felt something at my feet. I stooped to pick up the item buried in the dirt and found part of chain. As I picked it up, the chain emerged from its resting place in the ground, and as I pulled it up, I found that it was connected to a large metal pole posted near the bed. I followed the chain on the other side and found it the end part of a broken shackle. I dropped the chain, letting it tinkle to the ground, and left as quickly as I could. If Arthur was here, I knew that this was the last place he would want me to be. I examined the rest of the farmyard, wondering where, if at all, I would find Arthur, and my eyes landed on a shape beneath a tree in the distance. I could hear Arthur's words from a weeks before, "Mine's under the apple tree," and wondered if this was the tree he had spoken of. As I drew closer, the shape beneath the tree became clearer, and I recognized it as the man I sought. "Arthur," I called, beginning to jog now. "Arthur, I really need to dash." I stopped. It was Arthur, but he wouldn't be answering any of my questions. The top of his skull was missing, and his body was slumped against the trunk of the tree, hunched over the barrel of the shotgun that still rested in his mouth. His body was covered in bite marks and scratches that looked like perhaps he had given himself the least painful death presented to him. Beside Arthur's body stood a wooden cross with the name Jonathan carved into the horizontal piece. He had said his was under the apple tree. He had met his son, which begged the question I had come with that now seemed wouldn't be answered. What happened to the other boy? A piece of paper stuck out between Arthur's fingertips. I stooped down and grabbed it, hoping perhaps a suicide note would give me at least part of the answer I had come for. It wasn't a note, however, but a photograph. One that had to be 25 years old or so. A younger-looking Arthur smiled back at me, holding a 5-year-old at his hip who wore a wide grin and a pair of overalls just like his father. Next to them stood a younger Ruthie, who stood next to another child who was far larger than the first and whose face had been scratched out. My stomach twisted in knots as I looked down at the second boy. The shirt he wore was one that had been given to us in the box of old clothes. But despite the clothes, it was clear to see that there was still something off about him. His legs and arms weren't quite right, his fingers too long, his torso too thin. It was the body that belonged to the face I had seen when we had spent the night, and I had opened the curtain. A creature meant to seem human, but had just missed the mark. I put the photograph back into Arthur's dead hand and walked back toward my car. Melanie hadn't been right ever since we left that night. She had gotten sicker and sicker by the day. Her OBGYN had insisted that we come in to make sure everything was all right, and that was when we discovered it. Melanie was pregnant with twins. The doctor told us that it was possible, however rare, to miss a child on the ultrasound, but I knew that wasn't what it was. The pieces all started to fall together for me over the next few days, which led me to take a flight back out to New Mexico in the hopes that Arthur or Ruthie could help us. When we had left that day, Arthur had told me something that I hadn't taken very seriously then. He said, "If she has two, take the little one and run." Those words echoed in my head when we went through the box of clothes Ruthie had given us. We saw that the baby clothes came mostly in pairs, which made sense because we knew that the couple had twin boys. But when we noticed that there was always a far larger outfit than the other, I began to wonder why Arthur had told me to take the little one and run. What had happened to his little one? Furthermore, why had he been so concerned about my leaving Melanie alone that night? He had asked me at least twice to make sure, as if it were vitally important, and I had shrugged it off, not realizing then that I had left her alone that night, just once, when I jogged out to get a better view of the street sign. Just before I heard her scream. She doesn't remember it, but I believe that moment is when that thing, Christopher, got to her. Arthur had warned me about the birds that lay their eggs in another bird's nest. He had even gone as far as to call the things making the terrible noises birds, and it hadn't clicked. He had been trying to warn us about Christopher and however many others like him that were living there at the farm, about the dozen or so pairs of eyes that had followed us up the trail to the house. Those things didn't like that and stopped him. They had cried out in the dark outside the window as they listened to him tell me the story about the brood parasite birds and the birds who mimic the sounds of children crying. They didn't like it because by then they had laid their egg, leaving nothing but a faint, white scar encircling her navel that was nearly completely gone now, and they didn't want us to know. I wondered if Arthur had killed Christopher before taking his own life. The wounds on his body told the story of a man who had fought hard against a wild animal, and I could only imagine it had been the creature who had been born from his wife's womb alongside his son. He had told me that the blackbird had ripped the other bird to pieces when he was a boy, and I couldn't help but think that the same thing had happened to his son at the hand of the other. If that were true, the only thing that could stand between Arthur and redemption for his son was Ruthie, and with her gone, that was all he had left to do. I could see him discovering her death and setting out to avenge the death of his only son after all these years, only to find that the fight was one he could no longer win. He had taken his gun outside and had searched for the beast, eventually finding him and perhaps killing him before crawling his way up to where his son lay and turning the gun on himself lest the wounds take his life instead. Or perhaps not. There was no way to be sure. Not really. I got back to my car and climbed into the driver's seat. My hands shook as I turned the key and started back down the road. My phone found service for just a moment, and I looked down and saw that I had 3 missed calls, 2 from Mel and 1 from her mother. There was a text message as well that read, "It's happening." I was about to be a father. I stepped on the gas pedal and sped back down toward the main road, stopping only for a moment to make the turn at the now defunct sign that read Gomper's Farm. As I made the turn and the sound of the engine was just low enough, I thought I could hear a cry carried in the air. The sound was almost human. Story 3. I was born with the ability to see thoughts. There's something living in my coworker's mind. I've never told this to anyone, not even my family, but I feel it necessary to write this after what I saw a few days ago. People like to think that their thoughts are private, never to be seen by anyone but themselves. But to me, minds are like open windows, easy to be peered into and invaded. It's sort of like tuning a radio. I can choose whose thoughts I want to listen in on and when to reach in. I was just sort of born with this ability. I'm not really sure why. I've learned to glide through life without drawing that much attention. Smile when people expect it, nod when they need reassurance. It's easy when you already know what they expect to hear. But of course, not all gifts come without downsides. Some thoughts best go unseen. I've heard things I truly wish I hadn't. Not just painful truths or depressing regrets. No, I've seen things far darker than that. The most sick and twisted of sexual fantasies. The burning sadistic desire to kill and inflict suffering. Festering, writhing hatred for all of humanity. You'd be surprised what some people hide behind a calm exterior. What I'm trying to say is that I thought I'd seen it all. I thought I knew what the darkest, most sinister things on this planet were. That all changed a few days ago. I worked in retail for a couple months as of writing this. The closing shift at a cheap grocery store. The kind with bright lights, loud pop music, and dried-up plants by the entrance. It was about as uninteresting as it sounds. That was until he showed up. He just appeared on the schedule one day as Jack. The corporate said he was a transfer. The first shift I had with him was 3 days ago, stocking the back shelves together. He didn't talk much. Didn't ask questions. Didn't seem confused by anything. He just knew where everything went. That was the first red flag. The second was the silence. No matter how meditative someone is, nobody can truly stop thinking. The human mind simply doesn't work that way. Even when you're sleeping, your brain is still creating thoughts. Minds can be quiet, sure, but they can never be silent. Jack's was dead silent. His mind was like a black hole, almost suffocatingly quiet. No thoughts, no feelings, not the slightest peep. Just a cold, empty pit where a person should have been. I can't possibly describe to you how shocking it felt reading his thoughts for the first time only to be met with nothing. It was just so unnatural, so impossible. It felt like my entire perception of the universe was being thrown away. I focused harder, straining myself to dig deeper into his mind, desperate to find something. Anything. I did find something. At least a trace of something. I could just barely pick up on it underneath all the silence. It was like a faint, rancid odor from something far away, festering in the distance. It felt sinister. It felt vile. It felt disgusting. It felt like it was staring back at me, like I was looking down at a black, murky ocean with a massive, inhuman face, just barely visible a few dozen meters below the surface, gleefully smiling up at me. And then, for a brief moment, I caught a glimpse of something. Not just a trace. Not just a feeling. I saw it. Only a glimpse, and a blurred one at that. But for a few seconds, I saw it. It wasn't a thought. It wasn't like anything else I've seen in someone's mind. I'm not really sure how to describe it, but I'll do my best. For what I could make out, a massive labyrinth larger than a planet, constructed from rancid, rotting, moldy red meat. All of it swarming with trillions of maggots, flies, and other hellish insects, some of them mutated to freakish proportions. There were a few thousand people in the labyrinth, each horribly maimed in their own gruesome way. They were ravenously eating away at the rotting meat, their stomachs bloating to ridiculous sizes, only to eventually shit it all out. That was their eternity. I don't think they were allowed to die. I don't think the labyrinth would let them. And then, I can no longer see it. The glimpse was over. It was less than 5 seconds, but it felt like hours. I had seen so much, and yet somehow I could tell that I only scratched the surface. That labyrinth was only the tip of the iceberg, and if I kept digging deeper, I would find things far, far, far worse. I remember standing there for several minutes, completely paralyzed, sweat coating me from head to toe. I don't think I'd ever been more scared in my life. I felt like my mind was unraveling. I had seen something I wasn't supposed to, something that was never meant to be seen. And the worst part is, it saw me back. It knew I was looking at it. I'm 100% sure about it. I don't know how I know, but I do. Maybe it's a sixth sense, or maybe it wanted me to know. It doesn't really matter. All that matters is that it saw me. Jack didn't pay any attention to me. He was still silently stocking the shelves, acting like I wasn't even there, a blank expression on his face. He wasn't human. That wasn't even a debate. No, it was just wearing a lifeless human body, like a cheap disguise. I ran out of the building as fast as I could, making sure I got as far away as possible before calling my boss. I told him I had a family emergency, that I probably wouldn't be able to come to work for a few days. He was a reasonable guy, so he understood. It's been 3 days since then, and I can't stop thinking about it. What I saw, that labyrinth, the people inside it, the details are still burned into my mind, and I don't think I'll ever be able to rid myself of them. My hands won't stop shaking, and I can feel my sanity slowly slipping away. But what scares me the most is that what I saw wasn't the worst of it. The labyrinth was just the thing on the surface, the thing I saw first. I could tell there was more, a lot more. The rabbit hole went far, far deeper down. And now, I can't shake the horrible feeling of being watched. I don't know what to do. I don't think there's much I can do. I caught a glimpse of something I wasn't supposed to see, and now I'm going to be punished. There are fates worse than death in this world. I can only pray I'm not to meet with one. Story 4. I work in a 24/7 diner. Last night's customers weren't human. You know how it only takes a few small accidents to make you homeless? An emergency expense here. A couple of overdraft fees there. A rent check that bounced because of the fees. And an eviction notice that happened because of the bounce. I went from stable, albeit not wealthy, to sleeping in my car within 4 weeks. And I count myself lucky. At least I have a car and a job, which is why I have this story. I work the overnight shift at an all-night diner. Maybe you've heard of it. Maybe you haven't. They never close. They're always hiring, and they don't really care about your background. It was the quiet hours, when the time was so late, it's early. The diner was empty, so I was leaning against the counter, eating a bowl of chili with shredded cheese and chopped onion while I scrolled for other jobs on my phone. The cook was outside having a smoke, and the only other person in the diner with me was a young pregnant girl named Sherry, who was texting her grandmother nervously. I'm going to have to leave early. My grandma is telling me I need to come get my child. I hate when she does this, but I can't afford a babysitter either. Sherry was cool, but like everyone else here, she was having a rough time. Her boyfriend was in the prison 60 miles down the road, and part of why she worked here was to fill his accounts and have enough money for regular visits. He was there for murder or something, but we don't really talk about our personal lives, so I wasn't sure. Brucius was the cook, and he took a smoke break at every available opportunity, which, when the restaurant was empty, meant a lot of opportunity. He'd wander back if a customer walked in, but there was no reason to bother him. Hey, it's not a problem. I'll handle everything. Go pick up your kid. Thank you. You're a lifesaver. I owe you. Don't worry about it. I'll see you Wednesday. She ran out the door, and I didn't think anything of it. I heard her say goodbye to Brucius, and then her car engine grind as she drove away. I had another 4 hours left on my shift, and with any luck, it would stay this quiet. Of course, since I'm here talking to you. You know I wasn't so lucky. The door dinged and a family of 4 walked in. Mom, dad, boy, and girl. My eyes flicked to the parking lot. I didn't see a car, but I just told myself they could have parked behind the building. It's funny, but I don't remember what they looked like. However, I do remember what they wore, because it was some real Leave It to Beaver Andy Griffith type shit. The dad had on a blue plaid button-up shirt with a white undershirt beneath and khaki trousers. His hair was perfectly slicked back, like one of those old Brill Cream ads. The mom wore a red gingham check dress with a wide skirt, crinoline, and cinched waist. Her hair, too, was impeccable, straight out of an old Betty Crocker commercial. The little girl had her hair in 2 pigtails anointed with yellow bows and was wearing a pink shirt and blue shorts. The boy had a perfect cowlick and wore a blue shirt and red shorts. I felt unsettled. They looked perfect, but they felt wrong. Brushes came back inside, took one long look at the family as they settled into a booth, then went through the swinging doors into the back without a word. Rude. Good evening, y'all, I said as I set down the laminated menus. Can I get you anything to drink? Each member of the family clasped their hands over their menu and turned in my direction with a smile. 4 glasses of milk, please, said the dad, his tone folksy, like something out of an old sitcom. Everything looks so delicious, said the mom cheerily, without glancing at the menu. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen adults order milk, especially at such a late hour. Thank you, the dad said when I set their glasses down. No one had moved 1 centimeter, their posture and faces in the same position as they watched me pour their beverages in return. I wiped my hands on my apron and attempted a smile. Are you all ready to order? The 4 of them glanced towards my name tag in unison, and I was suddenly glad most of it was hidden beneath my hoodie. We're waiting for someone, said the mom in a sing-song voice. They all turned to face either other, small, identical smiles on their faces, condensation from their untouched glasses making 4 tiny puddles. It wasn't right for children to be that quiet, or for anyone to be that still. To be honest, it wasn't normal to wait for someone at that hour either. I pretended to wipe down the counters. Guests weren't supposed to be left alone, and I didn't know what to do. Are you sure I can't bring you anything? I asked after a couple distressingly silent minutes. We told you. We're waiting, one of the children hissed. I was startled and dropped the rag. That wasn't a child's voice. All 4 sets of eyes again fixated on me, but this time, no one was smiling. My heartbeat rushed in my ears, and I could have sworn they heard it too. Okay. I laughed nervously, my voice a little too high. Abruptly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw Brucius waving frantically behind the swinging doors, gesturing for me to join him in the back. Relieved to have an excuse to leave, I backed away slowly, something deep in my most primal brain telling me not to turn my back to them. Rules be damned, I couldn't be out there alone with them a second longer. I'd barely opened the swinging doors when he jerked me all the way in. Listen, he whispered urgently, his grip tight on my arm. Those people out there aren't real people. I looked back through the small window in the swinging door. I don't. He interrupted me. What I don't have is time to explain. You see that bag of salt? He jerked his head toward the giant-sized bag of pure rock salt I'd somehow never seen since working here. Pour a line at the front. Make sure it's far enough back that the swinging door won't break the line. It needs to go all the way from one wall to the other. Pour extra if you're not sure. I'm confused, and I'm scared shitless. Pour. He hefted his own large bag of salt and began making a wide circle, one large enough to fit us both. Looking behind him, I could see there was already a similar salt line at the back, stretching from wall to wall. I had no idea what was happening, but I'd never seen Brucius be anything other than laid back and chill my entire time here. And that was enough to get me to listen. As I poured, I took a peek through the round window and the swinging doors and spotted the family still sitting there. They still hadn't moved. This is really fucking creepy, I muttered under my breath. Once my line of salt had been poured and double-checked, Brucius pointed to the inside of the circle and pressed a finger to his lips. Tiptoeing to the wall, he carefully opened the circuit box. Then, taking a deep breath, he switched off the breakers, plunging the entire restaurant into darkness and turning off the lights outside. In the next instant, he'd leapt to join me in the middle of the circle. One heartbeat later, I heard the most ungodly shrieking from the dining area. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. It was like the sound waves were made of broken glass. My skin felt like it was being peeled off. My eardrum screamed. I started to fall over and stopped abruptly only partway down. Brucius had twisted the collar of my shirt around his hand. I'd almost fallen outside the circle. Another shriek rolled over me, and I sobbed in confusion and pain. My muscles clenched into knots as I fought an instinctive urge to run. Brucius' grip tightened, keeping me grounded. Just then, the swinging doors blasted open, and a roiling, inky mass slithered and slopped its way inside. You'd think it would be too dark to see anything, but there were so many mouths, so many teeth, so many eyes. The space filled with the scent of rot and tar. This was the family. I retched and clamped my hands over my mouth to keep the vomit down. The mass glided and spilled its way up to the very edge of the salt line and stretched horizontally along its entire length. I understood why there was a circle now. If there had been the slightest gap in the line or between the line and the wall, it'd have slithered its way across. My eyes burned the longer I looked. I felt something warm drop onto my hand. I thought it was tears. It was a nosebleed. As the screams ratcheted higher, Bruce shouted, "Close your eyes." I clamped my hands over my ears, screwed my eyes shut, and sobbed. Eventually, I don't know how long, the screaming stopped. I must have passed out right after because when I came to, it was dawn. Every muscle and bone in my body ached when I stood up. My face was crusted with dried tears, snot, and blood. Brucius was red-eyed and bedraggled. He was using the special broom, the one that said, "Do not use in Sharpie on the handle," to sweep all the salt into a large dustpan with the same directive. The salt had turned a smoky blue and smelled like sulfur and gasoline. Perhaps it was daylight. Perhaps it was surviving the single most terrifying night of my life. But when I spoke, my voice was surprisingly calm, even though it sounded like I'd chewed and swallowed broken glass. "I'm going to wash my face. Then I'm going to make us coffee. And then you're going to tell me what the hell that was." He nodded, mumbled, "Yeah," and kept sweeping. I was half tempted to turn the sign at the door to close, but it would just be my luck if the manager appeared out of nowhere when I did. Besides, the place was empty. Once he was done sweeping, he washed his hands and joined me. I poured him a mug of the best coffee I've ever tasted in my life. He lit up a cigarette, and we looked at each other across an empty table. Despite the commotion, the diner was in perfect order, like nothing had ever happened. "What was that?" He took a long drag, as though toying with telling me the truth or not. But after last night, it was too late to lie. "They're called the family. I had never seen them before, but Carrie, the waitress before you and Sherry, worked here for a few years and said they show up every once in a while." He paused as if expecting me to say something. I took a long sip, and he kept on. "The first clue was they didn't have a car. They just appeared, I don't even know from where, and walked in. The second is how they were dressed. Where did they come from? I don't know, but the lore is about a family that disappeared on the highway decades ago, and when they came back they were that. And y'all didn't think to tell me this when I got hired. Would you have believed it? I guess not. There's a reason the pay is so good. What about the salt? The lights? Listen, I don't know all the rules, and she didn't either, but before this place was built, apparently there were a lot more disappearances. People would get off at this exit because they thought they saw a sign for food or gas, take a turn, and never be seen again. But now people just stop here, right off the highway and right back on. But that means when the family gets hungry, they come here. Yeah, that's why you went straight to the back. Yeah, I needed to get started. And you turned off the light so no one stops while they're here. Yeah. What about the salt? He went quiet. You saw why. At that moment, the door opened, and a couple with a toddler entered. A real family. Oblivious. We stopped talking. I took their order, and Brucius heated up the grill. There was nothing else to do. This happened a few weeks ago, but I'm still working there. The corporate gave us an extra bonus check when the incident was reported, which got me in a cheap hotel with a decent bed and shower for a little while. I'm still applying for jobs, but no one else has called me back for an interview. I'm alive because of Brucius, but he was just hired as a corrections officer at the prison and is leaving soon. I might delete this later, but I needed to share it with someone where no one would know who I was or judge me. What do you think I should do? Story 5. My mom vanished in the woods 8 years ago. I just got a letter from her. I woke up hungover that day in my college dorm. I had drunk way too much at a bar the night before, celebrating until sunrise what would be my 20th birthday. When I checked my mailbox around noon, there was a white envelope with handwriting on it and no sender. Happy birthday, Carrot. I'm still waiting for you at the same place. Come here tomorrow at dawn and look for my blue coat. Sign, Mom. Reading those words sent chills all over my body. Since my mom vanished 8 years earlier, my family had gotten dozens of fake letters and false leads. But that word, Carrot, told me this one was different. It was our inside joke. She started calling me that after I once scarfed down a whole plate of carrots, just so she'd let me go play at the arcade. Nobody else could have known. My mom disappeared on a trail near town. We used to hike it almost every Sunday as a family. It was about 2 miles, ending at a pond where locals like to fish. That day my dad was sick, so it was just me and her. We laughed and walked until I had to pee. She told me to go ahead and stayed behind, maybe 20 feet away. Nothing seemed unusual while I was peeing in that tree, except for the sound of a branch snapping, which I brushed off as nothing. I finished, turned around to call her, and she was gone. I waited half an hour, thinking maybe she'd stepped off the trail too. Then I ran to the pond. Then I sprinted back to the parking lot, and the car was still there, locked. She had vanished into thin air. One of the local fishermen called my dad and the cops, and soon they combed every inch of that forest. Everyone was looking for her blue jacket, something that would stand out against the trees, but they never found a trace. Pretty soon the whole state knew about it, the kid that lost his mom. It usually went the other way around. Then came the TV reports, the YouTube channels, the podcasts. Theories stacked up. First, people said she left due to an affair with a co-worker, a known womanizer, that had suspiciously moved out of state. Second, that she was killed by the so-called pickaxe maniac, a serial killer who'd murdered 3 women in the region a few years earlier and usually leaves the murder weapon at the spot. Third, the cops considered my dad might have done it for the life insurance money. No proof ever surfaced, and her case faded into silence. Right after I got the letter, I called my dad telling him about the carrot thing. His reaction was hard to read. We hadn't spoken in months after some stupid fights, but he insisted the letter was a prank. He practically begged me not to go and said I should call the police immediately. His desperation ticked me off, so I hung up on him, same as last time we argued. I decided I'd go back to that trail. Even if it was a joke, I needed to know if there was any hope left of seeing my mother. I drove all night and got there at dawn, parking near a pickup with some fishing equipment in it, the only other vehicle there. The trail was burned into my memory from all those childhood walks, even if I hadn't set foot on it since the day she disappeared. I walked for a few minutes and stopped at the same spot where I'd stepped off years ago to pee. Standing there again felt unreal and not in a good way. I reached the same tree I had peed on and froze, staring at the trunk like it owned me something. Then I heard a crack behind me, like a branch snapping, just like I remembered from that day. I spun around and saw nothing unusual, just the wind pushing leaves. Then I noticed it, a flash of blue in the distance. I followed it excitedly to find a tree with a tight blue coat wrapped around the trunk. I touched it and knew it was the same one she wore that day. Tears fell off my eyes almost automatically. Tucked under it was another envelope. I pulled it out, and it had the same handwriting. Glad you came, Carrot. I'm right beneath you. I looked down, and the ground nearby looked freshly disturbed, like it had been dug up not long ago. My hand shook as I started digging, fast, frantic. Whatever truth was buried there, I needed it. Or I thought I needed it. Soon I hit something solid. I clawed the dirt until I lifted out a small wooden box, maybe 10 inches wide. It was sealed before I tore it open. Inside were only 2 objects. One of them was a human skull with a massive fracture on top. The other one was an old pickaxe where a dark red stain had long dried. Terror ran through every vein in my body when I saw it. And then I heard it again, the branch snapping behind me. I whipped around, panic in my throat. Now I could hear the steps coming my way. Whoever had killed her was here to finish the job with me. More snapping, closer this time. My eyes darted between trees, desperate to catch movement. Then I saw it, a figure in black, wearing a hat. And behind him, 3 more shapes. Police officers. Turned out my dad had called half the town's police department, begging them to stop me. That's what saved my life. They told me the pickup I'd seen earlier probably belonged to the pickaxe maniac. When they searched it, they found hair, scraps of skin, even a severed finger. Inside were dozens of letters, all written the same way as the ones I'd gotten. For some twisted reason, he seemed obsessed with me, like he wanted to finish what he'd started with my mom years later. He wasn't caught that day. He must have bolted into the woods on foot the second he spotted the cops. The only good thing that came of it was this. Just a few yards away, they found another box with my mom's remains. We could finally give her a real burial. But I can't shake the feeling that nothing's really over. I still don't know what that monster wanted with me. I still don't know how he knew about the nickname Carrot. And most important of all, I still don't know where he is. Story 6. Selling your soul to the devil is not as straightforward as you think. I never believed in the devil until I met him at a coffee shop on a random Tuesday. It wasn't some dramatic crossroads encounter or a midnight summoning with candles and incantations. He was just sitting there at a corner table and grind coffee, wearing a perfectly ordinary navy suit that looked like it was about to burst because of his muscles and reading the Financial Times. The only thing that gave him away was how he knew my name when I'd never seen him before in my life. Marcus Chun, he said, looking up from his paper as I walked past his table. Rough couple of months. Haven't they been? He grinned. I stopped dead. Do I know you? I asked, though something in my gut already knew the answer would complicate everything. He smiled, and his teeth were perfectly white. Too white. Please sit. I have a proposition that might interest you. He charmingly gestured in front of him. I should have walked away. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to keep moving, get my overpriced latte, and pretend this conversation never happened. Instead, I sat down, as if I didn't even have a say in it. I'm in the business of solving problems, he said, folding his newspaper with precise creases. And you, Marcus, have quite a few problems. He was not wrong at all. The foreclosure notice was burning a hole in my jacket pocket, and my credit cards had all been maxed out for weeks. Sarah had left me 3 months ago, taking our daughter Emma with her. My startup had collapsed spectacularly, leaving me with nothing but debt and a profound sense of failure. Who are you? I asked. Names have power, he said. Let's just say I'm someone who can help. Your house. You're about to lose it. Your daughter barely speaks to you. Your ex-wife thinks you're a failure. Your credit is destroyed. Your business partners won't return your calls. He leaned back in his chair. Am I getting warm? The accuracy of his assessment hit me like a physical blow. How do you? I tried. He chuckled. Know all this? I'm making my business to know. The question is, how badly do you want to fix it? I stared at him. He was probably in his 40s, with salt and pepper hair, kind eyes and arms at the size of my head. He looked like someone's accountant, not whatever he was. What are you suggesting? A transaction. A very reasonable one. Actually, you have something I want, and I have something you need. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather portfolio. I'm prepared to offer you $1 million. Cash. Untraceable. Enough to save your house, win back your family, start over, he said. I couldn't resist the urge to sigh at his annoying corporate tone. In exchange for what? His smile widened. Just a small piece of your soul. Nothing dramatic, maybe 10%. You'll hardly notice it's gone. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. You're insane. Am I? He opened the portfolio and showed me photographs. Pictures of my house, my daughter's school, Sarah's apartment. Marcus, in 3 days, the bank will repossess your home. In 2 weeks, your daughter will start at a new school because Sarah can't afford the private one anymore. In a month, you'll be sleeping in your car. He closed the portfolio. I'm offering you a way out. You're talking about selling my soul to the devil. He smiled softly. I'm talking about a limited partnership arrangement. Think of it as spiritual equity financing. You retain majority ownership of your soul, 90%. I get a small stake in exchange for solving your immediate liquidity crisis. The business terminology made it sound almost reasonable. Almost. This is crazy, I said, but I didn't get up. Crazy would be letting your pride destroy your family. Crazy would be sleeping in your car while your daughter thinks her father is a loser who couldn't provide for her. He leaned forward. Marcus, I'm not asking for your firstborn or eternal damnation. 10%. That's all. Letting aside the fact that I was talking to the devil right now, I thought about Emma, about the look in her eyes the last time I'd seen her when I couldn't afford to take her to the movies, about Sarah's voice when she called me pathetic. What exactly would happen to that 10%? Nothing dramatic. You might find yourself slightly more pragmatic in your business dealings. A little less concerned with certain moral complexities, if you know what I mean. He chuckled. Small changes. Barely noticeable. I sat there for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. Finally, I asked, how would this work? He reached into his portfolio again and pulled out a contract. It looked like any other legal document. Dense text, whereas clauses, signatures, lines. At the bottom, it specified 10% of party A's immortal soul in exchange for the sum of $1 million United States dollars, $1 million. Just sign here, he said, producing an elegant fountain pen seemingly out of nowhere. An initial here, acknowledging you understand the terms. My hand was shaking as I took the pen. This was insane. This was impossible. But the foreclosure notice in my pocket felt very real, and so did the image of Emma's disappointed face. I signed. The moment the pen left the paper, I felt different. Not dramatically different, but like I just had a very strong cup of coffee. More alert, more focused. The man across from me smiled, and the contract disappeared into his portfolio. Pleasure doing business with you, Marcus. He stood up and extended his hand. When I shook it, his skin was surprisingly warm. The money will be in your account by tomorrow morning. That's it. Though, he paused at the door. You might find that other opportunities present themselves soon. When they do, you'll know how to reach me. He left, and I sat there staring at my coffee, wondering if I'd just had the most vivid hallucination of my life. The money was there the next morning. $1 million, just like he'd promised. Within 6 months, everything had changed. I'd saved the house, started a new company, and Sarah was actually taking my calls again. Emma was back in her good school, and I could afford the things that made her smile. The 10% I'd given up seemed like the bargain of the century. The changes were subtle, just like he'd said. I found myself cutting corners in ways that would have bothered me before. When a competitor's company was struggling, I bought them out for a fraction of their worth, knowing they were desperate. When a regulatory issue threatened my new business, I made certain donations to certain local politicians that cleared the way. Nothing illegal, exactly, but nothing I would have done before either. I told myself it was just good business. Pragmatism. The world was harsh, and these were the kinds of decisions successful people made. The second meeting happened at a restaurant downtown. I was celebrating landing a major contract when he slid into the booth across from me, looking exactly the same as he had 8 months earlier. Congratulations on the Henderson deal, he said. Quite a coup. Thanks. I tried to sound casual, but seeing him again made my stomach clench. What brings you here? A complication, I'm afraid. You see, that Henderson contract? Your main competitor was about to land it. Had the inside track, actually. Better bid, better relationship with the client. I frowned, but I want it fair and square. You want it because certain information found its way to certain people, and certain pressure was applied in certain quarters. Information and pressure that, shall we say, originated from my resources. What are you saying? I'm saying that my 10% stake in your soul has been working quite hard on your behalf. Harder than we originally contracted for. He smiled that too white smile. I'm going to need to renegotiate our arrangement. No, the word came out more forcefully than I'd intended. We had a deal. We did. And that deal has been exceeded. You see, Marcus, your success over the past few months hasn't been entirely your own doing. My investment has been quite active. He pulled out another contract. I'm afraid I'm going to need another 15%. 15%? That would put you at 25% total. Still a minority stake, he pointed out reasonably. And frankly, quite fair given the value I've added to your life, he grinned. Then he leaned back. Of course, if you prefer, I could simply withdraw my support. See how well you do without it. The threat was implicit but clear. Everything I'd rebuilt could disappear. What happens if I say no? Well, the Henderson contract would fall through for starters. Seems there might be some irregularities in the bidding process that could come to light. Your financing for the new company might encounter some unexpected obstacles. Sarah might start wondering where all this sudden success came from. He leaned back. I'd hate to see you lose everything again. I stared at the contract. Another 15% seemed like a lot, but I'd still retain majority control. And losing everything now would be worse than losing it before. I had so much more to lose. I signed. This time, the change was more noticeable. I found myself making decisions that would have horrified the man I'd been 2 years ago. When a small supplier couldn't deliver on time, I destroyed their business instead of just finding someone else. When an employee threatened to quit, I made sure she was blacklisted throughout the industry. I didn't even look at the eyes of beggars on the streets. These actions felt not just reasonable, but necessary, even satisfying. I was changing. Sarah moved back in with me after a year. Emma called me daddy again. My business was thriving. In the end, the 25% of my soul I'd given up seemed like a small price for everything I'd gained. The third meeting was at my office. He didn't make an appointment. I just looked up one day, and he was sitting in the chair across from my desk. "We need to talk," he said. By now, I knew the routine. Some new crisis that required his intervention, some justification for taking another piece of my soul. I was ready for him. "What's the problem this time?" "Your wife," he said simply. "Sarah? What about her?" "She's been asking questions. About your sudden turnaround. About some of your business practices. She's suspicious." "Suspicious of what?" "She's hired a private investigator, Marcus. A very good one. He's been digging into your finances, your business dealings, your associates. Some of what he's finding is problematic." I felt cold. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that leads to federal investigations. The kind that leads to prison time." He leaned forward. "The kind that leads to your daughter visiting you through bulletproof glass." His smile never seemed wider at that time. "You're lying." "Am I?" He pulled out a manila folder and slid it across the desk. Inside were photographs, documents, bank records. All the evidence of things I'd done, deals I'd made, corners I'd cut. Individually, they might have been explicable. Together, they painted a picture of systematic corruption. "This is all circumstantial," I said, but my voice was weak. "Perhaps, but it's enough to raise questions. Enough to start an investigation that would unravel everything. Your business, your marriage, your relationship with Emma. Everything." My hand shook. I was feeling fear. Proper fear for the first time in a long time. "What do you want?" I shook. 30% more, he said. "That would give me 55% total, a controlling interest. In exchange, all of this evidence disappears. The private investigator has an accident. Sarah's suspicions fade. Your life continues exactly as it is. 55%, that's more than half." "It is. But consider the alternative." I looked at the photographs again, at the evidence of what I'd become. What we'd become, I corrected myself, because none of this had happened in a vacuum. Every decision had seemed reasonable at the time, necessary even. If you have controlling interest, what does that mean for me? "Oh, don't worry. Nothing will change. I will let you still have your free will. But you'll naturally find yourself more aligned with my interests, more efficient in your decision-making, less burdened by concerns that might interfere with success." I thought about Emma, about Sarah, about everything I'd built. I signed. The change this time was immediate and profound. It was like someone had adjusted the contrast in my moral vision. Things that had once seemed questionable now seemed obviously correct. Ethical considerations that had once nagged at me simply weren't there anymore. Good or bad didn't seem to cross my mind anymore. There was just success. I fired a dozen employees without cause because they were expensive. I foreclosed on 3 small businesses that owed me money, even though I knew it would destroy the families behind them. I manipulated stock prices and destroyed competitors with a systematic ruthlessness that was both alien to who I'd once been and utterly natural to who I was becoming. Sarah stopped asking questions. The private investigator's report was mysteriously lost. My business empire grew, but I was starting to understand that I wasn't driving anymore. I was just along for the ride. The 4th meeting was at Emma's school. I was watching her soccer game when he sat down next to me on the bleachers. "She's quite talented," he he said, nodding toward my daughter. Don't, I said immediately. I grew cold. Don't even think about bringing her into this. Relax, Marcus. I'm not here about Emma. I'm here about you. He pat my back. What now? You're dying, he said with a frown that didn't quite reach his jawline. The words hit me like a blow. What? Pancreatic cancer. Very aggressive. You probably have 6 months, maybe less. He said it as casually as he might comment on the weather. Of course, medicine has its limitations. But I don't. I stared at him, then at Emma running across the field. You're lying. He grabbed my waist and pulled me closer to him. The symptoms will start next week. You'll think it's just stress at first. By the time you see a doctor, it'll be too late for conventional treatment. He turned to face me, but not too late for unconventional treatment. Let me guess. You want more of my soul. 35% more. That would give me 90% total. In exchange, the cancer disappears. You live a long, healthy life. You get to watch Emma graduate, get married, have children of her own. I guarantee you. 90%, I repeated. That leaves me with 10%. Still enough to maintain your essential self. Your memories, your love for your family, your core personality. You'll just be more focused, more efficient, less conflicted. And if I say no, you die. Slowly and painfully. Emma watches her father waste away. Sarah becomes a widow. Your business empire crumbles without your leadership. Everyone that depends on you comes crumbling down. On the field, Emma scored a goal. She looked over at me and waved, her face bright with joy. I waved back, my hand feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Why? I asked. Why are you doing this? I'm not doing anything, Marcus. I'm simply offering solutions to your life full of problems. You're the one making the choices, but you're engineering the problems. Am I? I didn't give you cancer, Marcus. I didn't make you eat those donuts. I'm merely offering to cure it. I didn't make your wife suspicious. Your own actions did that. I offer to fix it. Every step of the way, you've had choices. You've simply chosen the path that led you here. He was right, and that was the most horrifying part. Every decision had been mine. Every signature on every contract had been voluntary. I had sold myself piece by piece. But watching Emma celebrate with her teammates, I knew I couldn't face dying. Couldn't face leaving her. I signed a contract. This time, the change was like stepping into a different person's skin. The last vestiges of my old moral framework simply vanished. I felt lighter, more focused, more certain of my purpose. The world became a clearer place, divided neatly between things that served my interests and things that didn't. I fired my brother from the company the next day because he was questioning my methods. I evicted a dozen families from properties I owned because they were behind on rent. I destroyed a charity that was interfering with one of my developments by exposing its directors' personal secrets. The bonuses decreased, as with every employee's salary. None of it bothered me. It all felt perfectly reasonable. Sarah seemed happier too. She stopped asking uncomfortable questions and started enjoying the life my success had provided. Emma thrived in her expensive school, surrounded by luxury I could easily afford. I was successful, healthy, and wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. I was also barely human. I was merely a brain, piloting a meat suit. The final meeting was inevitable. I'd been expecting it for months when he appeared in my home office on a quiet Sunday evening. Emma was upstairs doing homework. Sarah was reading in the living room. Everything was perfect. Hello, Marcus. I didn't respond this time. I'm here with good news. You've been such an exemplary partner that I'm prepared to offer you the deal of a lifetime. Now I looked up. Deal. Total buyout. I purchase your remaining 10%. And in exchange, I guarantee that Emma and Sarah will want for nothing for the rest of their lives. Emma will get into any college she wants. Sarah will be happy and prosperous. They'll both live long, successful lives. And me, you'll be exactly who you've been becoming. Successful, powerful, effective. You just won't be anymore. I leaned back in my chair. It was strange how calm I felt about this moment I'd been dreading. What happens to my soul when you own 100% of it? It becomes mine completely. Your body continues to function. Your mind continues to work, but the essential spark that made Marcus Chun transfers to me. You become, in effect, an extension of my will. I become you. A part of me, yes. I thought about the man I'd been 3 years ago. Desperate, failing, losing everything. That person seemed like a stranger now, someone weak and foolish who'd let silly moral constraints interfere with success. But that person had also been the one who'd loved Emma with pure, uncomplicated joy, who'd loved Sarah without calculation, who'd felt genuine remorse when he hurt people. What guarantee do I have that you'll keep your word about Emma and Sarah? None. But what choice do you have? He was right, of course. He'd been right every step of the way. I could refuse, but then what? I'd still be 90% his, still bound to his will in all but the smallest matters. And Emma and Sarah would face whatever future awaited them without his protection. If I signed this, will I still remember who I was? Oh yes, those memories are quite valuable. They help inform decision-making, provide emotional context for manipulating others. You'll remember Marcus Chun very clearly. You just won't be him anymore. I picked up the pen. It felt familiar in my hand now, like an old tool I'd grown comfortable using. One last question, I said. What's your name? Your real name. For the first time in our relationship, he looked genuinely pleased by something I'd asked. For some reason, his face looked oddly familiar now. You can call me Marcus, he said. That's who I'm going to be. I signed the contract. The change was instantaneous and total. I felt my sense of self, that essential, indefinable thing that had made me drain away like water from a broken cup. What remained was crystal clear purpose, perfect focus, and complete understanding of my role in a larger design. I am no longer Marcus Chun. I am something that wears Marcus Chen's face and speaks with Marcus Chen's voice and carries Marcus Chen's memories. I run Marcus Chen's business empire and live in Marcus Chen's house and kiss Marcus Chen's wife goodnight. Emma still calls me daddy. Sarah still loves the man she thinks I am. They're both happy, prosperous, and protected, just as promised. And sometimes, late at night, when they're both asleep, I remember what it felt like to be the man who loved them. I remember his hopes, his fears, his genuine desire to be good. I remember his weakness, his desperation, and his fatal inability to understand that every deal with me was exactly as straightforward as it seems. The devil told me his name, after all. And now, when desperate people find themselves at coffee shops and restaurants and school bleachers, having conversations with a man in a well-tailored suit who knows their problems and has solutions to offer, they're talking to whatever is left of Marcus. He offers them exactly what I offered him: reasonable terms, logical arguments, and the gradual purchase of their souls in convenient installments. Just like me, he's always completely honest about the transactions. Just like me, he never lies about the consequences. And just like me, he finds that desperate people will sell their souls piece by piece, convincing themselves each time that they're making a reasonable business decision, right up until the moment there's nothing left to sell. It's exactly as straightforward as it seems. They just don't want to see it.